Finding Forrester is slowly eating warm apple pie while a soft ride goes on all around you, and in the end, everyone gets their just desserts. So, Finding Forrester. Finding Forrester is a drama, coming-of-age tale, unlikely bedfellows movie, directed by Gus Van Sant, written by Mike Rich, starring Sean Connery, Rob Brown, a few others in there as well. Came out in the year 2000. It is fun, educational, light, wholesome, direct, layered, balanced, casual, inspirational. And I'll tell you why it's all those things, and why you should watch it, because it's a wonderful little movie, and I like it a lot. So first off, we'll reference the Gus Van Sant thing. So he was the director of Good Will Hunting, and I feel like there's some similarities here that it's funny because I never would have drawn those similarities without knowing that the director was the same. I think that if you've seen Good Will Hunting, I need to do a review on that sometime next time I watch it. I love that movie a lot. And I think that it is a little more fast-paced and more dramatic than this. But this is a milder feel, but a similar feel of how one tells a story. And as one of the actors in some of the behind-the-scenes kind of footage said, that Gus Van Sant is drawing the truth out quietly. And I thought that was a brilliant way to express what's happening here. Because I think both those movies and both the stories and the way that they're told, they draw the truth out. And this one is a little quieter than the other, and just different truths that need to be drawn out. And it's a different story, right? But it is definitely not as, I don't know, it's not as saturated with drama and events, and the pace is a little slower. But that's also why it was mentioned, drawing the truth out quietly. So ultimately, we've got a story of a young man. That's why I mentioned a coming-of-age tale as well. We have two main characters, and basically we have a young man and we have a much older man, and they are from different backgrounds, but they live in the Bronx, South Bronx, and the circumstances in which they meet isn't great, but they both have a lot to learn from each other. That sounds really corny, and the thing is, I want to express later how it's... It's, I mentioned it's wholesome and inspiring, but I don't think it's done in a corny way. And it inspires a lot of things. It inspires thought and thinking about yourself and, I don't know, a journey of self-discovery, the cliches, But it does it really well, and I think it does it in a really nice, real way. Similar in some instances to Little Miss Sunshine, except that Little Miss Sunshine, again, those are much more dramatics. The stakes are higher, and the pace is quicker. But it has an edge to it. This doesn't have as much of an edge, but it's not a Disney movie either. We've got just, a 16-year-old boy and his friends and the things that they get up to and their conversations. And although I don't find this movie crude at all, it's fairly safe that way, and definitely non-violent, but there are conflicts. There are real-world conflicts. And a lot of them are in the periphery, and they're not straight on. There are some straight on, but they actually address a lot of different things here, which is what I love about it, without it being so heavy-handed. I mentioned, it is wholesome. I think the story is wholesome, that these two unlikely friends become friends, and the things that they learn from each other and how that happens. I didn't mention this before, but no spoilers in this one, so you don't have to worry about that. I mentioned that it's pretty casual, and that's what I mean. There's a lot of these lessons that get presented to you, or these ideas or events that you can just take from it what you will, but they get brought to you in a more casual way a lot of the time. There is some directness too, though. I don't think it's heavy-handed, but it can be direct. And there are some direct challenges that get thrown out there from both characters at each other and the world. I mentioned it being layered, and that kind of goes into the whole thing of just the things in the periphery where they do talk about race, sometimes directly, but a lot of the time in the periphery as well. And they talk about privilege, and they talk about representation, and we'll get into that a little more. I mentioned that it's pretty light, and again, it's. I feel like there's a realness to it. There's not a lot of raw or edge or like. It's not aggressive, but there is this realness to it. It's just a little soft, but not Disney soft. We're not talking about like it's not G-rated. But yeah, and it's fun. There's a lot of humor in here, and things are handled with lightheartedness a lot of the time, but there are serious things happening as well. And in the end, I just feel like it's a very satisfying ending. I feel that there are people that, if you're into, justice, I feel like people, like I mentioned, get their just desserts, and I feel like people definitely, I feel satisfied. I feel satisfied with how things play out, and that there are some people who get called on their stuff, and yeah. So to summarize a little bit, again, we've got these two men that are drawn together by these circumstances that are not the best, and they learn from each other. A little more about our main character, Jamal, played by Rob Brown. He's when I talk about representation, this isn't a spoiler at all, but we've got this black kid from South Bronx who is going to this high school. Seems just like we don't see a lot of the high school, but we get the feel that it's this inner city high school, that people really care about what he can do with his physical abilities and playing basketball. They don't care so much about what he can do academically or creatively, but he is an academic and a creative person. But he's trying to figure out in this coming of age story of like how can he be authentically himself amongst his peers, and also just do what he wants to do. But we've got the realness of what other people might think, right? And how he's being accepted amongst his peers and his friends and other people. I will say that the other thing that's represented here is diversity of character. We don't have one-dimensional characters here. There's a lot of growth, but also from the very beginning, with especially Jamal, we know that he's got these different interests. He's not a stereotype, right? And yet he is in a world where he can be stereotyped very easily, with his upbringing, his family situation, where he lives, the color of his skin, some of his interests as well. But there's other things with his abilities and his other desires that reach far beyond that stereotype. And it's nice to see this type of representation, but not being so heavy-handed, right? Especially this is over 20 years ago, right? It was 22 years ago this thing came out. And so now there's a lot more of like, oh, people can be nerdy and everybody, and there's a lot more of like, you don't have to wear that hat. Like, you can be who you are. 22 years ago, this was brought about in this movie, again, not heavy-handed, but it's there, and I like the way that they present it. So I'm going to go down to target audience. So I feel like summarizing, it's hard to do without spoilers, but let me give you a little more. So I mentioned that it's educational, and I think that it's educational in a way other than like, oh, we see representation, we talk a little bit about race, but it's not like a movie based on that. We learn about friendship, and it's nice, but we learn about ourselves. But also, honestly, if you are a writer or dabble in writing, I think there's some actually just like the way that they come in here, it's not like someone's presenting you. You're not sitting in a classroom and someone's just like making you read a textbook. But there are some lessons here that you can apply to your writing to be a better writer. And they're really easy, and they make sense, and they're presented in a fun way. That's not the function of the movie, but they come about. And I learn things that I still use to this day and think about when I'm writing, or when I think about writing, that came from this movie, and I think they're really, really helpful. And so that there is this element. It is not an artsy movie by any means. It's just kind of a chill. It's not an indie movie either. It's not this huge blockbuster. It's really hard to tell you the feel, right? Like it's the feel I feel like of. I think it's the feel of Good Will Hunting, but it is just a little more chill. But you do have this creative element to it that you could learn from if you are a writer. And so, writing is a main thing in this movie. The act of writing, what it can do for us, how we can go about doing that in a creative way, in an academic way, the importance that can serve, the value. But it is just something that ends up tying our characters together, and they learn from each other. In this aspect. And it's just a wonderful little story. It really is. And like I said, it's the little. I don't think it's a tearjerker, but it has some happy sad for sure. And so that's in there too. Anyway, target audience. If you are into something that's wholesome and inspiring, but it doesn't have to be corny or epic. It's not like this crazy sports tale. It's like, oh, I'm so inspired. This guy did this thing and he had no legs or whatever, right? Like it's not that kind of epic journey of inspiration either. But it is inspiring in a way that makes you kind of maybe think about yourself a little bit and your circumstances, friendships, family, relationships, that kind of thing. I think that I wouldn't say it's an important movie, but it is. How do I word that? I think its function is noble. I think that it was important for me with some of the things I learned from it with writing. I think that if you take the writing element right out of it, it just is like a nice, friendly, entertaining movie that's a little soft and can make you feel some warm fuzzies and challenge you a little bit. Where is it on my shelf? For me, it's high on my shelf. It is not top shelf, but it's high on my shelf because of that writing element and the things that I learned from the movie in that sense. But while being presented in this really fun way, and something that I like to share with other people. And I think that, again, the function is noble. If you're into something that's wholesome but not corny, that has some realness to it, that has these other elements but they're not heavy-handed, hopefully you'd be into it. It's a nice story. It just is. And I don't know if you'd cry. I don't cry in movies. I get close sometimes, but not in this one either. But it tugs the heartstrings a few times. So I don't know what else I can say about Finding Forrester, but you should find a copy and you should watch it because it is pretty awesome. How else can I wrap this up? Finding Forrester.